The sun hung low and hot, a heavy, sullen weight over the cracked train platform in Nebraska. 1892. The Orphan Train sat like a beast at rest, breathing out clouds of dark smoke that drifted slow across the yard. The wood beneath their feet was dry and splintered, dust gathering in the gaps. A line of children, some wide-eyed, others emptied out and dull, waited for strangers to come claim them. He stood a little apart, a boy of 12, slight and pale beneath the dirt. His trousers hung loose from sharp hips, a hand-me-down shirt missing its second button. In his arms, a small wooden box. Nothing special about it, except the way it was bound up with coarse rope like a secret best kept tight. He held it close to his chest, as though it might anchor him to this world. The woman with the black velvet gloves stepped down from the car with a ledger in hand. The wind lifted the edges of the page as she called names in a practiced, empty voice. No one spoke Elias Boone's name aloud. She marked him off with a stroke of her pen and moved on. The boy waited. A wagon arrived in a chorus of rusted wheels and fly-bothered horses. The driver was a tall man with a face like worn leather and a drooping mustache that hung low over his upper lip. He said nothing, made no greeting, just flicked his chin in a quick, sharp motion. Elias climbed in without a word, the box never leaving his grasp. The wagon rolled away from a station and the world he'd known, past brittle wheat fields and a crooked fence where a wooden cross leaned at a sharp angle. The body of a small sparrow lay stiff in the road, one glass bead eye catching a flash of sun before the wagon wheels turned it to dust. The farm rose out of the plain like a forgotten thing, dry grass clinging to its edges. No other children. A wife waited on the porch, thin as paper, her eyes sunk deep into her face. She did not smile. Behind the house, a windmill turned slow in the dying light. The man pointed to a narrow cot shoved up beside the stove. No words. That was his bed. That first night, when the house went still and only the sounds of distant coyotes and the restless squeal of the windmill filled the dark, Elias untied the rope. The knot had been worked and tightened so many times the fibers bit into themselves like a clenched fist. He opened the box with care. Inside, a photograph. Faded, the corners softened by age. The image of a young woman with laughing eyes and dark hair pinned back from her face. She wore a simple dress, and though the color was long lost, something in her eyes remained bright. A broken chain lay beneath it, still strung with a locket no larger than a coin. The clasp rusted but intact. He turned it over in his hand, not opening it. Not yet. A scrap of folded paper rested at the bottom. The ink had blurred and bled. The words turned into water-stained ghosts. Only a few letters remained clear. He pressed them all back into the box, tied the rope tight again, slipped it under his thin pillow, and lay staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, the wife wept, a brittle, dry sound like leaves scraping glass. Seasons shifted. The sun came and went. Winter bit deep. Spring churned the rivers brown. Elias grew. His shoulders widened. His hands hardened from labor. His back ached beneath the endless weight of farm chores. He spoke little. When he did, it was to the soil, to the animals, to the empty sky. The box remained in the house. No one touched it. At 17, the storm came, boiling over the plains, turning daylight to dusk. Wind tore at the house and screamed through the cracks. The barn shuddered and groaned. The man went out to secure the roof beam and did not return. Elias found him crushed beneath the beam, blood gone black in the mud. The wife gave Elias his worn shoes and a handful of coins in a cloth. She did not meet his gaze. She said only, "Go." And so he did. The rain was steady as he walked. Each step pulled at his limbs, heavy with exhaustion but unbroken. The box rested under his arm, dry despite the storm, the rope clinging tight. He didn't look back. The road was endless. Not a road, not really. Just a ribbon of dirt and grass and stones that wound between towns too small to be marked on any map, through empty fields where wheat once stood, and now only dry stubble remained. Elias walked it without hurry, the rope-tied box always under his arm, or slung by its fraying cord over his shoulder. He stopped where work could be found, where a meal could be earned, where a stranger's barn might open for a night's shelter. In grain mills thick with dust, he swept floors until his lungs burned. In boxcars rattling west, he slept in the corners, the box clutched against his chest. On river barges heavy with cargo, he worked for food, his hands blistered and cracked. Townsfolk remembered him, though he never stayed long enough to become part of their stories. They called him the man with the rope-tied box, the quiet one, the one who left before his name was known. Once, in a town whose name he never asked, a girl with copper hair and a voice like cracked glass sat beside him on a splintered porch as the sun slid low. She offered him a drink from a bottle she hid in her apron. When he took it, the whiskey stung his throat, but he didn't cough. "What's in the box?" she asked, her gaze lingering on it the way others did, curiosity soft and a little sad. Elias looked at her a long while, and something flickered in the lines around his mouth, in the pale of his eyes. Then he stood, set the bottle down, and walked into the night. By dawn, he was gone, and the girl's name was one more he never spoke again. In the hills beyond the river country, a mining camp clung to the earth like a scab. The air smelled of coal and sweat, and the men spoke little, but worked hard. Elias took a job hauling timbers into the tunnels. It was there, in the black hours before dawn, that fire came. A lantern tipped, oil spread, and the camp lit up like dry grass. Men screamed and ran as the wind drove the flames through canvas tents and over crude shacks. Elias moved through the smoke, like a figure from a half-remembered dream. A child's voice called from a collapsing tent. Without thought, he went in, pulling a small girl, soot-smudged, coughing, clutching a rag doll, into his arms. He carried her clear of the fire, set her on her feet, and vanished before thanks could find him. By the time dawn broke, there was no sign of him but the ash beneath his boots. At 29, gray threaded through his dark hair. He found work on a bridge crew driving spikes and hauling wood. The men spoke in grunts and rough jokes, and Elias kept to himself. One cold morning, a man named Miller lost his footing and fell into the river below, the ice swallowing him before help could come. Elias found Miller's pocket watch half buried in the mud, chain snapped. The numbers worn, the glass cracked. He wiped it clean, and when the bridge was finished, he took the watch to a house at the end of a crooked lane. The widow opened the door, thin and brittle as old paper. When her eyes settled on Elias, she let out a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "Samuel," she whispered. Elias shook his head once. He placed the watch in her hand. She wept as though she knew him, or had once. He stayed until the sun fell behind the trees, then turned away down the lane. The woman watched him go. Later that year, deep in Kansas, beneath a cottonwood tree on the outskirts of a town without a church, Elias carved his initials into the bark. E.B. 1909. Below it, he dug a small hole and placed a stone inside, plain, round, nothing remarkable, then covered it with earth. No one saw. No one would know it was there. A passing farmer swore he saw a man kneeling in the churchyard outside St. Louis once, the rope-tied box resting beside him in the frost. No one knew whose grave it was. The headstone was old, the name faded. Elias stayed until night fell, then left as he always did. He moved with the rumors of war on the horizon, the Spanish flu in the east, the drought chasing farmers from their land. His teeth loosened, some lost to infection. His hair thinned, the gray at his temples spreading like frost. The skin of his hands turned rough, knuckles scarred and thick. Yet the box remained the same, its rope fraying but unbroken, the wood worn smooth from years of his touch. Inside, the photograph yellowed at the edges, but the woman's eyes still laughed in the same, unchanging way. The locket's chain rusted, its shine long gone, but Elias never tried to mend it. The folded scrap of paper, its words barely ghosts now, rested beneath them both. He would open the box each night, wherever he lay, as though to remind himself he was still tethered to something promised long ago. No matter how the land changed, no matter what faces came and went, he carried it on, through seasons of famine and years of plenty, through fields turned to dust and towns that rose and fell. The box aged with him, and yet somehow it did not. Winter laid heavy over the town like an old, gray shroud. The river to the east moved slow and black under its skin of ice, and the trees stood stripped and brittle along the roads. Chimneys coughed pale smoke into a sky that never quite lightened. The man who arrived that December was older than the road. His clothes hung from him in thin, tired layers, patched where they could be and left bare where they couldn't. His hat was frayed at the edges, the crown sagging, the band faded to the color of dirty bone. His boots were split at the sides, mud caked thick between the seams. But it was the box people noticed. The same old wooden box, held beneath his arm like something worth more than coin or name. The rope that bound it was brittle, worn to threads in places, but it held fast, the knot still tight. At the small store by the crossroads, a stooped man with a crooked back and a beard gone almost white looked up from behind the counter. His eyes searched the stranger's face for something familiar, then gave up. Nothing left from those days, the storekeeper said, voice a rough thing after years of dust and cold. Most gone to earth, the rest forgotten. The old man only nodded, his pale eyes steady. No complaint, no question. He rented a room above the tavern, a narrow place beneath a sagging roof. The walls leaned in, and the single window had warped, its glass blurred by age and weather. A candle sat by the bed, and the wind moved through the gaps in the boards like the long breath of something waiting. That afternoon, he went down to the old train platform, where nothing arrived and no one waited anymore. The weeds had taken it, dry and brittle, rising through the boards. A single rail remained, rusted to a dark orange, half buried by dirt and grass. The sign overhead, once painted with neat, proud letters, was cracked and rotted. Only the first 3 letters lingered, W. He stood there as the light went, the sky turning violet and blue, and the air thick with the promise of snow. His hands hung at his sides, the box under one arm. He might have spoken, but if he did, no one heard. Night came in slow, and the town shuttered its doors. In the room above the tavern, a candle flickered against the glass, throwing long, weak shadows. The old man sat at the table, the box before him. His hands, lined and stiff, untied the rope for the last time. It slipped loose, falling in soft loops to the table. He opened the lid and took out the photograph. The woman's eyes still laughed, though the paper had yellowed and the corners had curled. The locket followed, its chain rusted but whole. He laid them on the table beside the candle. The hands that touched them trembled. A boy of 14, too thin for his coat, with eyes too big for his narrow face, was sent up by the tavern keeper's wife with a blanket. The door hung ajar. The boy hesitated, then stepped inside. He saw the box first, then the photo, catching the flicker of the candle's light. He pointed. "Who's that lady?" The old man lifted his gaze, slow and heavy, and it seemed for a moment as though he struggled to remember how to speak. Then, very quietly, as if the words were made of dust, he answered, "My mother." The boy stepped closer, his brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. "You find her." The question hung there, thick in the space between them. The old man looked down at the photo, his thumb moving across its worn surface. A long, hollow silence. He shook his head once. "She said she'd come back for me," he said. "Train left me here. I waited. Year after year. Always had this." He touched the box. Never opened it. Not for anyone. His voice was like dry paper tearing. The boy didn't speak. He left, closing the door behind him. The old man stayed seated, watching the flame dip and rise. Not long after, the door opened again. The boy returned, a small flower in his hand, pale, already browned by frost. He laid it beside the box. A weed from the churchyard. No words. Then he was gone. By morning, the room was empty. The old man was nowhere to be found. The bed untouched, the chair by the table pushed back. On the table, the box rested open. The rope lay in a tired coil beside it. Inside, the photo of the woman with the laughing eyes. The locket beside it, chain curled like a sleeping snake. The candle had burned to a pool of wax. The flower, dried and brittle, lay across the box's edge. The window rattled softly in the wind, and from somewhere far away, the whistle of a long-dead train echoed over the frozen fields. The box turned up 2 days later at the town's tiny post office, The one with peeling paint on the doorframe and a bell that barely rang when you pushed inside. It was left on the step in the blue-gray light of morning, frost clinging to the rope's worn strands. The handwriting on the top was crooked, faint, the letters shivering as though written by a hand no longer sure of itself. To whoever knows her. That was all. No return. No sender. Just those words, stretched like a last breath across the weathered wood. The postmaster, a man too old for his work but too stubborn to leave it, brought the box inside and set it on the counter. Word traveled, as it does in small places where little happens and everything matters. By dusk, a half-circle of townsfolk gathered in front of the tavern, faces lined with wind and age, hats clutched in work-roughened hands, the air thick with the hush of waiting. The widow of the tavern, Ruth Carver, was the one to open it. Her fingers, still strong despite the years, worked the brittle rope loose, lifting the lid, like she might find a ghost inside. There it was, the photograph, the one whose corners had rounded with time, but whose face stayed the same. A woman with dark-pinned hair, a smile in her eyes, a softness untouched by the weight of years. A folded scrap of paper lay beneath it, the ink faded to brown threads. Ruth unfolded it carefully, as if it might turn to dust. She squinted in the dying light, lips moving as she tried to find the words. And then, in a voice that cracked like the winter branches overhead, she read them. Asterisk, I will find you. Wait for me by the train. Asterisk. No one spoke. Not for a long while. The last of the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a smear of purple and ash. Then a sound, sharp and sudden, breaking the hush. An old woman near the back of the crowd let out a sob, clapping her hand to her mouth. Her name was Eleanor Finch, and she hadn't spoken of the past in years. I remember her, Eleanor said, voice shaking. Miriam Boone. That was her name. Left here near 40 years ago. Had a baby boy, wasn't but a child herself. Said she was going to send for him. Swore it. Left behind a locket. Left behind everything. Folks said she vanished, no word since. The boy, the one from the night before, stepped forward. His face was pale in the last of the light. He pointed to the photo without hesitation. That's her, he said. And they all believed him. It was decided without words. No one needed to say what should be done. The town had buried its secrets before, but this one would be laid to rest. They carried the box through the brittle grass to the old rail line, where the platform had long ago been claimed by weeds and rot. The lone oak still stood there, bent and gnarled, its branches clawing the sky. Beneath it, a shallow hollow was dug, the earth breaking apart like brittle paper. The box was placed inside. A small stone was set atop the turned soil, rough letters carved into its face, Edat B. No sermon, no prayers, just a gathering of the living for the long dead, a silence heavier than words. Time moved on, the seasons unspooling their old routines. The names changed, the houses shifted, the road bent in new places. But the oak remained. The stone, too. Decades later, in the storm-split heart of 1974, lightning struck the tree, splitting one of its thick limbs. Rain churned the earth, and when it passed, a boy chasing a stray dog found the box half buried, its rope gone, but its contents whole. The photo inside was dry, untouched by water or weather. The woman's face, laughing still. It passed from hand to hand. A traveling historian bought it for a few dollars, and a story he didn't believe. It found its way into a small museum near St. Joseph, placed behind glass, labeled Unknown Orphan, Unknown Mother, CA 1890S. Visitors paused before it. Some read the card, some didn't. Yet again and again, people would find their throats tightening, eyes wet for no reason they could name. A face they didn't know, but one that felt like someone lost to them too. And somewhere, not so far away, the boy who'd met the old man that final winter had grown old himself. Hair silver, hands curled with age. He'd told the story often, at least the pieces he could carry. In his final years, sitting by a fire with a young grandson at his feet, he told it one last time. About the man with the rope-tied box. About the woman in the photograph. About the promise that lived long after most hearts had forgotten. His voice was weak, but steady. Some promises. he told the boy, his fingers tracing the rim of a mug. Never break, not even after 40 years. The boy listened, and though he didn't know the names or the faces, he believed it.